whenever I had moments where I thought something's not right here, I put that to me being the problem. You can't wake someone up to have an important conversation just because you think it's the right time. It's not the right time and it's unhealthy. So I then started saying, I can't do this. I can't respond. We'll end up in a fight because I'm not thinking and I'm going to react. I can't do this. But if you want to hear what I have to say, I'm telling you now and I'm not going to tell you tomorrow. It hit a point, first time ever, I said, I'm not doing this now. And the response back was, if you don't do this now, we're done. I'm leaving. And I went, good night. I obviously did not sleep that night, but I remember kind of going, is he for real? Like, is this actually what's happening now because of this? Because surely that doesn't make any sense, because someone would not do that. And I thought, oh, well, we'll deal with it tomorrow. And got up the next day and everything seemed quite normal. And I thought, okay, maybe he's not leaving then. So we were in the backyard and I said, so just about last night, where are we at with that? Oh, I'm still leaving. I'm like, okay, well then why are we doing this? What is this? Because I don't want to be doing this if this is over.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, to the podcast, and today I'm very happy to have a guest joining us who's got an interesting story to share, and I think we can learn quite a few things, as usually is the case when we talk about these situations, to see what might be similar to your situation, to see what lessons a person learns, and how we can use this in order to keep moving forward, which after all is the goal. It's to move you away from listening to content like this and watching content like this to doing more important things like going for walks and watching cute videos about kittens and bunnies and so on, as is spring in most places. So, Kylie, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. So we've been exchanging a bit. Kylie is a coach and has had a story with, of course, toxic people. One or multiple toxic people. We're going to find out. I don't know, actually. So, Kylie, tell us a little bit about what's led you to where you are today.
Sure. So I'll start on the coaching side of things. So I actually started coaching, it's probably about 20 years ago. There wasn't many of us around at the time, but it was more on the corporate side of things. So quite different to where I am now. But having said that, I don't think I ever had a corporate client that didn't talk about their personal life as well. So it was a few years ago where I started thinking, I think I want to move more into the personal coaching side of things.
Yep.
And I was also in a position myself I wanted to help people that had been in a similar situation to mine. So it was very specific. I do, coach people that haven't got the same experience as mine, but it is definitely a passion of mine to be there to support people with that background.
I think it's quite common when we've been through something similar. It's thinking, I can heal the wounds and move on, but if I can turn this into something positive, then it brings more meaning. And also we can empathize with people going through the same thing. And if we can shorten that period, if we can do it, then it seems very natural to do it. I'm just curious about coaching.
Yes.
And we're probably going to jump back and forth a little bit. About coaching, Sure. How did you get into that?
Yeah. So I was actually working with a client at the time doing company analysis work, some professional development recruitment work for this particular client. And the director of the company that I was working with, I did tell him I was leaving the current position that I was in. And he just turned around and said, well, can you continue working with me? And I said, in what capacity? And he said, I'd like you to coach me. And I went, not a coach. And he actually said, but you've been coaching me this whole time you've been working with me, and I would like that to continue. And I went, as long as you know that I've never classified myself or spoken about myself that way, but I'm happy to give it a go. So that's where it all started. And he moved through the organisation and ended up in New Zealand, and would, when he was in Australia, would book me for half a day and we'd just talk through things and talk things out. And that's where it all began.
Okay.
So from there, I started working for myself as well, getting my own clients, and also coaching people within organisations that I was working with.
Okay, so you already had the experience, the skill set, doing this, and then you wanted to move into helping people who'd been through something similar to what you'd been through.
Yes. So I was married I was in a relationship for 17 years, married for about 12 years, and it was a narcissistic relationship. So something that honestly I did not know until the relationship was over, that was my situation. So yeah, once I came to the realization that that's actually what had happened to me, and the situation that I was in, and once I had moved through that healing and found myself on the right path for me, I guess I had a light bulb moment where I went, I have some skills here that I could actually put to good use for other people, and support people as best as I can through their own experience.
So here I'm curious, because I've also been in situations where I was already working as a coach. I already had tools, and I was in a relationship that was toxic. I had the tools to communicate better. I had the tools to work things out, and yet I was in the midst of it, in principle, with all of the tools to see, and I couldn't see. And so you were in this relationship for a significant amount of time.
Yes.
And you already had the tools. What was that like for you?
Yeah. So, well, to be honest, because I hadn't put two and two together, and as you would know, when you are in a narcissistic relationship, you do think everything is your fault. So the awareness that I had in the relationship was nothing compared to what I had afterwards, and I could reflect back. So I don't even look at it as navigating it at the time. It was just my life at the time. And what I do know is that whenever I had moments where I thought something's not right here, I put that to me being the problem. So yes, I went to see psychologists and have conversations with them. But if they told me something that didn't sit well with me, which did happen, I would shut down. There was no way that I was going to believe that I was in a relationship that was abusive emotionally, or I was being bullied or taken advantage of. I would shut the conversation down and I wouldn't go back. So, yeah.
This is one of the things I see, that I experienced also, is if we just draw a scale from 0 to 100 of what percentage is our own responsibility. In these situations, it seems like we are absolutely adamant that it is exactly 100% us. And if someone suggests it might be 99%, we shut down, which of course is completely absurd. Because we know that it's not 0, sure, fair enough, and it's not 100. Yeah. I think we enter this binary thinking, and somehow these people create a blind spot where it has to be anything apart from them. And it's a very bizarre phenomenon, but these are one of the symptoms. It must be 100% me, like 100% of everything must always be my fault 100% of the time, because the alternative is scary. I think that's what might be going on. Like we can sense something's wrong, but we don't want to look at it. I think it's something like that. What is your take on that?
I agree. So as I said, I definitely knew something wasn't right, but I was convinced it was me, because that was what I'd been told again and again and again. And I also, I I had nothing else to go by, if I can say that. So I'm a person that I process through conversation. I download, I debrief, I talk through. And I no longer had the ability to do that, because if I did and that was found out, I was going to be in trouble.
Wow.
So for airing dirty laundry, talking to people about things in the relationship that should stay in the relationship. Right?
Yeah. So they play the loyalty thing there.
Yes.
Which of course is rather weird. I can understand that. Like, if there's anything that seems a bit shady, we give more loyalty to them, but they play the loyalty with them against the loyalty to friends, family, close people. So isolation, just to make sure the primary loyalty is towards them, and then of course anyone who suggests anything then gets ejected. It's rather interesting. Defense mechanism for a toxic relationship is it sort of inoculates them against any form of criticism from the outside, because anyone who dares do that gets ejected immediately. So very effective, but horrible.
It's very effective, and to the point when the relationship did end, I think everyone I knew was surprised. So there was a period of time before that we were trying to sort things out. That part was the biggest surprise, because no one had any idea that there were any problems to begin with. And, your friends mean well, and they kind of go, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you come to me? And I'm not going to say, well, I wasn't really allowed, because for me, that's really embarrassing, to be honest. It's almost like, how did I get myself to that point where I'm saying to myself, like a child, I'm actually not allowed to do that, because I might get in trouble.
Yeah, this is it's key. All of this shame, and people often, I see many people getting upset with the question like, why did this happen? Why did you allow this to happen? And they get upset. The thing is, I think it's a very fair question, because until we have the answer, it's going to happen again. You're probably familiar with transactional analysis, how that works?
Not quite.
Okay, you're going to love this. You're going to love this.
Yeah.
So this was created by a psychologist in the 60s, Eric Berne, Berne. And he talks about different ego states. And he says the ego state is sort of an automatic response pattern that we fall into, and we move between them all the time. So the main one, hopefully, is the adult ego state. It's the one we have now. So you and I are not identical. We're different, but there's no hierarchy between us. There are plenty of things you know that I don't know, and plenty of things I know that you don't know. It just means we're different, and we're adults, and that's that. Then we have the child ego state. The child wants two things, wants to feel safe and wants to be loved. Why do they want to be loved? Because if they're loved, they might be safe. This goes back to being cave people. And if you're a cave child and the 12 children and a saber-toothed tiger attacks, and you're the one that people like the least because you're annoying, because you're weak, because you're a thief, you're a liar, and you have to sacrifice one of the 12 children, well, we know who's getting sacrificed. So you'd better be liked. That's one of the reasons why, by the way, reputation destruction, which is the verbal violence, is so terrifying and so effective. So we often talk about physical violence, but the verbal violence is damaging psychologically, but we don't see it. Anyway, back to this with children. There are four kinds of children. The first one is the natural child who wants to play and have fun and laugh, and basically through learning acquires the skill set to become an adult. And we're primed for this. We're primed for becoming more competent, for becoming more independent, so we can be adults, so we can also have children, so we can contribute to humanity and life and bring up other people and share the skills. Basically, be part of life. Natural child. Second one, the adapted child. That's the child who has to adapt the behavior because otherwise they're not safe. Go and clean your room. Stop asking so many questions. Don't do this. You're annoying me. Change your natural behavior and adapt, or else. Got the threat. The third one is the rebel. The rebel is like the teenager. Go and clean your room. You want me to clean my room? Have you seen your room? You're just a hypocrite. The one who rejects authority. And the last one is the little professor who wants to show how much they know, because if only they can show that they've been a good child and they've worked well, then maybe they're going to feel safe. So that's the kid in class who shows they've done the homework, they want to answer all the questions, because they're trying to feel safe thanks to the teacher. But of course, then the other kids don't like them because they're annoying. And they think if they don't like me, it's because they don't realize how smart I am. So they double down on the attitude, which is heartbreaking, but it's a pattern.
Wow. Yeah.
Adult, child, and then, of course, we have the parent. The parent is anyone in a position of authority, a real parent, a judge, a professor, a teacher, a doctor, a news anchor, anyone we look up to. And the two kinds of parents, there's the nurturing parent who says, Kylie, we're so proud of you. It's really impressive, everything you've accomplished. You know, quite a feat. Well done. Which, of course, feels amazing because we fall naturally into parent talking down to a child, but we feel good and safe. Whereas an adult response to that would be, what's wrong with this chap? Why is he telling me this? I'm not a child. He's happy, okay, but he's talking down to me. That's condescending. That's the nurturing parent. Then you've got the critical parent. The critical parent is angry. What's wrong? Why do you do that? Do you think that's a good idea? Seriously? Who do you think you are? Now, you think you can go around helping other people? Really? With your experience, you think you're up to that? You know, you hear that, we naturally fall into child mode until we can go back up to adult and go, what a bizarre behavior. And especially if we get derailed, we're likely to fall into child mode. And all it can take is for a person to be, if we dislike conflict and someone threatens us with conflict, we derail quickly and we easily fall into child mode. And from then on, it's autopilot. And it's really hard to not derail and really hard to move out of child mode and go up into adult mode. So the thing of being allowed and not being allowed, if we're conflict avoidant, it's very easy. You know, it's just saying, I met up with colleagues for coffee. Why'd you do that? Critical parent, talking down to child, panic. I have to do something to stay safe. And as long as we're afraid, we derail much more easily, and it's nearly impossible to become an adult. And then we can keep up appearances, but deep down inside, we feel like an imposter. We've got the shame. We show something, but we don't feel safe inside. So that's the short version.
That's so accurate. So when I came into the relationship, you know, I was very career focused, had a lot of confidence. I would quite happily leave one job for another because I knew I was ready to progress and I backed myself 100%. And over time, it became, it's not that it became clear that that was no longer a big part of who I was, but there was something that shifted, that instead of finding that confidence within myself, I needed validation from my partner in order for it to be true.
Right. Yeah.
And what I found out afterwards, so once we had separated, my partner did actually say to me, you were so confident when I met you, I had to knock you down a few levels. So, no, and that's when I had that light bulb moment where I went, well, that's not right, but that makes sense as to where I am now, how I'm feeling now, and what happened for all those years. So yes. Absolutely, yeah.
It's something I've observed is so much. It sort of works in stages. It starts with adoration. So take your take your qualities, highlight them. You know, if anything, inflate them a little bit too much. But it feels good to actually feel. I sort of get the image of a balloon that's actually fully inflated to its full capacity instead of at 80%, because other people do. You know, they're so afraid of people feeling too good and having too much of an ego, they don't give enough. So someone gives us what seems like the right amount, and then they start deflating it. So I think because they validate at first, we think, you know, obviously this person has got amazing taste because they see all of these things. So when they start criticizing, we give them extra credit for it, but they have so much resentment at anyone being good at anything, especially anything they're not good at. And they tend to not be very good at many things, or they're not many things they tend to be good at. And their goal is often to deflate people as much as possible, either to lower them or just for the pleasure of seeing them be deflated. And it's it's uncanny and sadistic. And it can be confidence at work. other activities, music, art, writing, friends. It seems just systematic. Where they can deflate, they will deflate.
Absolutely. And it ends up being in so many parts of your life and happening so often that it becomes the norm. So I do remember, we were at a dinner, we had organised it together. My husband had started a new business and he wanted to take everyone out, and he was very, very proud. And he thanked certain people at the table except me. He even looked at me but didn't thank me. And I thought, oh, that's a bit unfair considering that I've been there every step of the way. And I remember one of my friends leaning over and saying, and thank you, Kylie, for all that you've done to support. And I'm like, yeah. And it's moments like that when you look back, you can see that bit by bit by bit, little bits starts getting stripped away from you, taken away from you.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that I had, I think, when I did realize this had happened, and we touched on it before, was moving away from how could I have let this happen? So, and it's only until you kind of go, well, it's kind of, there's your responsibility, but they've taken deliberate steps for this to happen.
Yep.
So then it becomes very difficult for you to have any sort of awareness that it's happening. And then you go, okay, so it's not that I let it happen. I just didn't know it was happening to me.
Yes, and I'd go one step further, which is the scam was because it is a scam. The scam was tailor-made for you, and was tailored continuously on an ongoing basis. So I get this image of, if someone's got a splinter somewhere in their arm and you're trying to find out where it is, you can go, it's amazing, you find it immediately, but all the person does is they run down the hand all along the arm until they feel it. So feel it here, okay, now press. And they keep doing that. It's like I also have this image of, I think it was in RoboCop, where he tries to recognize objects and he just has a scan of, is it a vase, is it a car, is it a cat, is it, actually, no, it's a person. And then got the portraits and the features. And they got all of this repertoire of horrible behaviors, and they'll keep rolling all of them and see which ones stick. So it is a pattern. It's small things. Each taken individually is not much. It would be unreasonable to make a fuss because he didn't mention your name. Because you could say, listen, it's obvious. Okay, if that's a one-off, fine. But if it's consistent toxicity, that's something very different. And one of the points I make is to avoid trying to diagnose someone as being, quote unquote, a narcissist, but instead take the different behaviors and go, these are toxic behaviors. And with each behavior, we assess both the frequency and the intensity, and we plot it out. So infrequent, low toxicity is part of being human, because it's tough. We've got issues. We've got stuff we haven't worked through. Okay. Frequent low-level toxicity is unlivable. It's torture, and we don't see it. Infrequent high-level toxicity is horrible and scary, and some people have frequent high-level toxicity. But basically, the first box is okay. If toxicity is going down, if it's staying the same, it's an issue, and if it's going up, it's a catastrophe. And all of the others are deal breakers. That's my view.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really good point, actually. So again, having that awareness at the afterwards, you do kind of realize how much of it actually existed. You just couldn't see it, but you pick it apart and you go, oh my goodness. I remember so many conversations. I remember every discussion. I only learned after the fact, almost to never have an argument because you were never going to win.
So you were mentioning that any small thing could become a conflict. So you had to put together strategies. And something I've noticed with these people is the sort of ticking time bombs, and anything can become a conflict. So we tend to think if it's becoming a conflict, there must be a good reason for it. Whereas I observe these people just want a conflict, and anything becomes an excuse. But of course, in these situations, we have to manage that because it's unlivable otherwise. So how did you do that?
Yeah. And look, I can really differentiate between what I did whilst I was in the relationship and unaware, and post the relationship when I had awareness. So not immediately. Yep. So in the relationship, when conflict did happen, and not talking about the early days because I had a lot more confidence and I backed myself then, but later on in the relationship, I would get defensive, really defensive, because it always felt like an attack. So even if I raised something as an issue before I knew it, I was the problem. And nothing I could say was actually right. Simple as that. So it didn't matter. I have the problem here, but by the end of the conversation, it is my fault that the problem exists. So post the relationship, what I learned was, firstly, I don't think I'm ever going to win. And even though when I say win, I just mean that my point is going to be received. So instead of doing that, I wouldn't have the fight. So I stopped having the fight. And they don't like that very much. They do like it when you bite. So
exactly
for me, yeah.
Yeah, the fight is the entire goal. It's
yes.
It's the saying, never wrestle with a pig. You end up covered in mud and the pig enjoys it. So
yeah.
there's obviously I think I did a video about that where I liken it to a card game where you got different cards you can play, and every time they play conflict, you play appeasement, and their goal is to get all of your appeasement cards. And sometimes you go from a conflict zone where normally, actually, you go back to something like you get closure because everyone's understood, but they play conflict and they switch into normal without having played the closure card. So we're confused. Okay, is it a conflict or not a conflict? And they switch back and forth. Whereas two healthy people would say, we've got a different point of view. I hear yours. I disagree. Let's pit the arguments, and we let the arguments fight it out. But what these people do is they go for ad hominems instead. And we see when people have cognitive dissonance, that's one of my pet theories now, people with cognitive dissonance behave exactly like narcissists, and might even be becoming narcissists. I remember one woman, it was so bizarre, who, ironically, she was on a date with a highly toxic guy, and you didn't know anything about him being toxic then. And she made this bold, ignorant claim about something like no Western person has ever done anything good for anyone in the entire world. One of these she was a North American, one of these claims that demonstrates a lot of ignorance. And of course I just retorted, yeah, how about Mother Teresa? We can debate her as a character and there's a lot of things to criticize. And she goes, well, she's Indian. Like, she's not Indian, she was Albanian. And she was adamant that Mother Teresa was Indian. So we'll look it up. I don't care. But I know factually that people look up to Mother Teresa as being an icon of somebody who's selfless and does a lot. And I know for a fact that she was Albanian. And she looked it up and she was furious. And you just think, you're furious. You could just go, oh, interesting point. I guess I'll revise my worldview a little bit. But she was furious. She looked for conflict and she lost. And I've had a few instances with people where they were looking for conflict. They were ignorant about some topics that I knew a lot about. So I simply bring factual information, tell them to look it up, which contradicted entirely everything they were saying. And it systematically became silent rage. And I knew they were going to try to pay for the fact that I'd proved them wrong. But of course, part of that is ego. Part of it is that the goal is to win. And, you're talking about you can never win an argument. It sort of to me, that means if two people walk into an argument or have arguments or conversations, and statistically, it's unlikely that one person is right 100% of the time. So if we walk in being open and honest and sincere and of good faith, we know that by and large, we can work something out together. But then I think the gut feeling was saying, it's not a conversation, it's a fight, and the person is trying to make me lose. But I refuse to see it. So I tried to find more arguments. But whatever you give, they'll spin it around as being wrong or fake. Or they'll find ways to make you doubt your sanity. Well, basically to gaslight you, make you doubt your sanity. And so at the end, it's very confusing because we refuse to see that we're actually spending time with someone who wants to make us lose. And regardless if we're right or wrong, they want to make us lose. It's difficult to admit that, but then the alternative is very confusing.
Yes. And I remember many a conversation where, again, we have children. So if it was a conversation about one of the children that we needed to talk through, we co-parent. So it's important to, still have those conversations, especially when they were young. But if an issue was raised about the child, and I guess there was I would phrase things in such a way that no one was to blame. We just need to have a conversation so that we can do the best for our children. But what would often come back is your behavior, you're doing this. How about you start doing this? And for me, it took me a while to learn that was not true. And he does not know me better than I know myself. And they were his words. I was absolutely told, I know you better than you know yourself. I don't know if you've ever heard those words, but that was very frustrating.
Yep.
Yep.
It's very common. They have this arrogance, and it's easy to think if we're used to being in child mode and we haven't learned to grow into adult mode, or we don't have the framework, which most people don't have. It's easy to think, well, maybe someone out there does know something better than I do because they're astute observers of humanity. And I think the two responses to that. Number one is the person a telepath?
Yes.
If they are, maybe. If they're not a telepath, or they're not certifiably a telepath, then the probability of them knowing anyone else better than the person knows themselves is close to 0%. So we can safely disregard that. And that claim is not, I know you as well as you know yourself, but I know you better than you know yourself. And the other point with this, I remember meeting a friend in Prague who had ended up getting separated from her husband. He turned out to be super toxic. And she still was, so she sort of understood the guy was toxic, but didn't quite understand the implications. And I think this is actually before, I'm pretty sure it's before I knew anything about all of this. And I remember having a conversation with her and just saying, imagine that we meet up in the evening and I seem dejected, I seem depressed, I seem very upset. And you ask me what's wrong. And I say, well, I met this guy in a cafe. We had a conversation and he told me all of these really harsh things about myself. And they were painful and there's some truth to it, but I don't know how far it goes. And I'm really dejected. And then, and then I mention, and his name was insert name of her ex-husband.
Mm-hmm.
And you go, ex-husband plus family name? And I go, yeah, that's him. What would you do? And she started laughing. She laughed so much. She go, don't listen to that clown. He's a muppet. He knows nothing. He gets everything wrong about everyone. And
wow.
So I go, okay, I hear you. So explain to me, if I shouldn't listen to him, why are you listening to him? Why should it be that the only person in the world who should listen to him is you, but no one else? And there was a bit of a blank. And she goes, that doesn't make sense. So if the person's an amazing judge of character, maybe we listen. If we know they're a muppet, then don't listen. And that's it.
And she's probably never thought of that before.
No, because it's always his opinion versus mine. He knows better than me. But his opinion versus anyone else, forget about it. So it can be helpful to take a step back and put things into context a bit and just think, if I would never advise anyone else to go and talk to him about, that's something I do also with my clients is ask, If me, needed some advice about relationships or some help or something, would you advise her go and talk to this person? Would you advise her go and talk to your ex-husband so he could help me out? You'd probably go, no way. Okay.
Please don't.
Yeah, please don't. And if you said anything, what should I do? Dismiss it or believe the opposite is true. Okay. So what are you doing? And then we get into the sort of hypocrisy, the blind spot of, oh yeah, I'm doing the opposite of what I'd advise people to do. Fair enough. Of course, it's a blind spot until someone points it out. Then we don't see it. That's why it's called a blind spot. But those frames can be quite helpful.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have a support network behind you, championing you, thinking of you, because when you're in that and you have those blind spots, there's no one there to help point them out for you, especially if you can't talk to other people about it, either because you're embarrassed, ashamed, or you're going to get in trouble. Yeah. But having someone to actually point things, be that mirror for you, is the only way of uncovering some of those things. And then you can start going, oh, wow, never thought about it like that. Didn't know that was happening. What can I do now?
That's true. And I'd even go one step further. If we're reluctant to talk about what's going on with other people, that's a really bad sign. And they sometimes, I notice sometimes they do that. They do the thing of, I'm broken, I'm damaged goods, I had terrible things happen to me. So I talk to you in confidence. So please don't repeat it. And that is, if it happens too quickly in a relationship, that's usually a red flag because it taps into reciprocity. I open up to you so you can open up to me, so then I can use this against you. Yes. And one of the I think key things in relationships is to say, that people go through tough things is fine. It's part of life. What have they done with a qualified professional therapist? I wouldn't even say a coach, I'd say a therapist to really work through these things. And if the answer is nothing, that's a bad sign because they're bringing in something pretty toxic they haven't dealt with and they're okay with it. It can seem a bit tough, and actually this taps into a question I had for you. I got a lot of questions that are coming up, which is when we have these coaching tools, sometimes it can feel a bit like the relationship becomes a pet project. Try to mend it, try to understand it, try to work on it. Have you also experienced that or noticed that? With
my clients or
people in these situations? with your clients or with yourself? When people are in it, it seems like trying to fix the relationship sort of becomes a pet project, and you think, that's a lot of energy to be expending on something that seems awfully broken from the get-go, or just after the honeymoon and the love bombing phase. It seems to be awfully flawed, but it seems like it's requiring so much attention and energy. And that seems like a common pattern that I observe.
Yeah, and I agree. So, and I can speak for myself on that front. So, my husband and I were seeing a therapist together, were working on the relationship to see if it could be salvaged. But at the end of the day, I was the only one actually working on it and working a lot, to the point where, we were both seeing people separately to work through our issues. Then the therapist that he was seeing mentioned that she does couples. So then he brought me in and stopped his own sessions. And I went, you still need to continue this because it's not just about us together, but it's about us as individuals. But I think he did a couple more sessions and then stopped it. And then during the couple sessions, the psychologist would talk to us separately, but in the same room. And it was my turn to dig deep, right? So we did that. And then the next time we were going to meet was going to be his turn. And we never went back. Right?
Yeah, that's typical. It's amazing how there's this avoidance. I remember one person who had who claimed that she had deep-rooted childhood trauma and adolescent trauma of the worst kind of abuse you can possibly imagine. And that was her narrative of this is who I am, that's why I'm a bit weird, and so on. And I finally got her to do therapy. And after about 4 sessions, just asking how it went, she said, yeah, the therapist says it's amazing. We're really working through things properly. We're communicating great. She just keeps saying it's amazing. And as I realized, what she's responding to is all the heavy lifting I am doing. But then I asked, like, have you spoken about the events in your childhood and your adolescence? She says, no, I've been talking about our communication problems. And you just think, you're explaining that these communication problems are because of events in, there's the cause and the consequence, the symptom. You said you'd be having these sessions to finally dig into these events. And there was nothing. And then, of course, later on, I found out that she had significantly altered the events to make them sound awful when the description I heard actually in court when she was suing after somebody who did things to her, the description was completely different. Even her own version in court was different. And the version from the other side was, this was what she described as did not happen at all.
Wow.
So, of course, I had no sympathy for him, but that was another moment of, wow, she was graphic in her description.
Yeah.
Factually doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. And like you say, also dodging the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. They want attention superficially, but they don't want anyone to sort of go behind the mask, peel behind it. Yes. Yeah. So that was with therapy, and I'm just curious how are you dealing with it when you were in the relationship, and there was always the constant threat of conflict. So how are you dealing with that?
Not very well. So I would say I became the biggest people pleaser. I became the good little girl that never wanted to get into trouble. So my aim, my goal was to make sure I was doing what was perceived to be the right thing. So to be honest, that's how I navigated it, really. I look back at that and I just go, oh my God, I'm not that person. But that's what I did. It was basically a survival mechanism.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I use a psychometrics tool called Lumina, which is sort of based off DISC, but goes further. So you might be familiar with DISC.
Yes.
And with the green side, the stability side, here we talk about people focused. And one of the elements they introduce is different personas. So how we are deep down inside, that's our underlying persona, how we are on an everyday basis, so how we show up to be, and then how we are when we're stressed. And this can change quite a bit. I'm going to read to you some of the qualities and how they change between normal and stressed, and we'll see if this makes any sense.
Sure.
Accommodating is one of them. Accommodating becomes acquiescing. And that is so accommodating that they give up what's important to them. The next one, collaborative, becomes consensus obsessed. So paralyzed by the need for consensus. Then the next one is empathetic, becomes emotionally stretched. So invested that they become emotionally drained and tired. And we can go on. Adaptable becomes unfocused, becomes distracted and lacks direction. Flexible becomes chaotic. Extreme flexibility that can create confusion and chaos. Spontaneous becomes impulsive, rash, impulsive, and lacks self-discipline. And then there's some other ones a little bit different. Sociable becomes can't be alone, so overwhelming need to socialize. Demonstrative becomes overbearing, overenthusiastic, and talks over others. But then at the same time, observing becomes detached and aloof, quiet and reclusive. And measured, the opposite of demonstrative, becomes serious and withdrawn, inexpressive and struggles to open up to others. Then intimate becomes passive, listens at the expense of sharing their own opinions. And even something like taking charge becomes controlling, so domineering and overpowering. And just so much of this seems to be symptoms of people in the toxic relationships where they say, I don't recognize myself. I'm not usually like this. What's happening? Oh yeah, we got other ones. Reliable becomes hesitant. Structure becomes rigid planning. Logical becomes argumentative. And I think what happens is they put people in a fear response, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, because we're afraid of losing them. We rely on them to validate our perception of ourself, but our perception of ourself, our psychological identity, is akin to our physical well-being. So if someone attacks us with a chainsaw, we know to get out. If someone tries to destroy us psychologically, we don't see it, but it's the same kind of response. And if we choose to stay with a person who is constantly trying to knock us down and hurt us and belittle us, but we're sort of tricking ourselves into staying there, into rationalizing it. We're putting ourselves in a danger situation just because we can't make sense of it. We don't get out, but we're in a dangerous situation, and it is. People might think it's not that bad. No, it's absolutely terrible. That's why often people say, I'd rather get punched in the face than go through that kind of nonsense again. At least with a punch, you see it, you feel it, you can heal, and it doesn't last for very long. But this kind of emotional damage can last for decades. We can ruin the rest of someone's life, and it's a heavy price to pay. And even 1 year when you're 20, a year when you're 20, like when you're turning 50, you'd give a lot to get 1 more year of being 20 something and having the energy and the drive and all of that's stolen. That's a heavy price to pay.
Absolutely. And I remember when I did start sharing with close friends, I guess, my experience of what was happening. I remember one thing that I would say was, but it wasn't physical. So I guess that's not that bad. And it was their response to me just going, Kylie, that can be worse. And again, still looking for, I guess, some validation, some, going through that recovery process, still doubting that what I was going through wasn't enough to end up where I was.
This is something, we come across quite often. Where do you think that comes from? I see it as being a fake dichotomy and a sign of toxic thinking, and it's pervasive. So where do you think this comes from? But it wasn't physical. Why this obsession, and why this binary thinking? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's just me personally, just how we've grown up with the knowledge of physical violence without speaking about the emotional side of things. So I knew about it and I knew it existed, but didn't know anybody that I knew of that had gone through that experience. That I guess for me, I do think it was the way that we are brought up in society. So physical violence, there is something to show for it. Having the psychological trauma and the emotional trauma is not visible. So for me, it almost felt like, well, then it can't be that bad. It's something that you heal from without knowing the depth and the damage that it actually does do. But I didn't know that until I was in the position that I was in, because I didn't know anybody that had gone through it.
Yeah, because we don't see it. That's a crazy thing.
We don't talk about it.
Yeah, then there's, part of it is the visual side. Part of it is it's easy, the visual side, it's easier to understand when it's happening. You don't really have that many mitigating factors. And but even, you know, if we do take it seriously, and most people don't, they say there's physical violence or they isn't. If we do take it seriously, there are different levels of physical violence. And this is something many people refuse to listen to or refuse to hear. I remember one person I knew who claimed that she'd gone into a drunken fight with her husband and he beat her. And so I asked for what I learned to do now is ask for the details. What specifically happened? She said, well, he pushed me against a wall and hurt me. That's what specifically happened. And what happened was he was trying to get out of his office. She was blocking the door and he was trying to get by, and finally he pushed her out of the way. And because she was drunk, she sort of lost her balance and she hurt herself. So I'm not saying it's okay to push her out of the way, but that's not the same thing as him giving her a punch straight in the face, which is what it sounded like to me. So that was able to go, you know, on a scale between 0 and 10, and we're not at 0 and we're not at 10. Are we too high for you? That's all that counts. If we are, you need a conversation. And, you know, and then she talked herself through it and said, well, it's the first time it happens. He wasn't trying to hurt me. It's true. I was provoking him into reacting a certain way. And, you know, and I think there's this element where we view it as being binary. It happens or doesn't, as opposed to there's a scale and mitigating factors. She had the honesty to say, I was provoking him. And actually, I was looking to make him react. And because he wasn't reacting verbally, I had to block him and provoke him physically to get him to react. And, you know, that led her to reflect, like, where's that coming from? You know, he doesn't do this. It's not in his nature, not in his character. He wasn't even trying to hurt me. And I did let myself fall forward in order to be hurt. So then I could, you know, and then she spoke better with a therapist. And of course, luckily it hasn't occurred again. But I think that there's this obsession with the physical side because we can see it, because it produces a victim and a villain. And at the same time, you know, that is true. And other things can also be true, which are that people can get provoked into it. That's part of the messy part of relationships. I remember one person actually told me that her boyfriend did hit her. And of course, everyone just dismissed him, said, get out of there, the guy's horrible, and so on. But then I mentioned to her in a video where I spoke about how she was creating conflict. I felt like I'd unmasked a narcissist. I had 6 symptoms simply from having lunch with her where it was unbelievably toxic, which then led me to go back. You know, for all we know, he just snapped and that was the goal and that's what she wanted. Because she was very good at trying to get people to snap. She enjoyed it as a hobby. So there might also be part of that as to why we're not aware of it is some people really don't want us to be aware of it, don't want us to talk about it. And they create fake dichotomies of, if you're talking about this, why aren't you talking about that? Or this is worse. It's not worse, it's different.
Yes.
Physical violence is not fun. It's got pros and cons. Psychological violence is horrible, and the pros and cons are different. By pros with physical, you see it, you know it happened. The pro of the psychological one is, well, you don't get the physical side. But if I had to pick, I'm not sure which one. I'd probably go for the physical one, because at least it's faster. And you recover and there's more clarity. So it's a weird thing to say, but I think it's important to learn to compare just to avoid having a blind spot. And I think we have this massive blind spot in society, unfortunately.
Yeah, agree. And again, just speaking from my own experience here, after, you know, a conversation at 2:00 in the morning that didn't go very well, and then needing to get up in the morning and go to pick up the children, drop the children off at school. If I was in a physically abusive relationship and I was hurt, I'd put on some makeup. I'm not trying to minimize it, but there's ways of covering it. For me, I had to change the way I thought, the way I spoke, the way I looked, the way my energy was. It's all a show.
Yeah.
And when that goes on for long enough, you can do it really, really easily and really, really quickly, just like that. And that becomes a big part of who you are, which is where that damage is. And that's so hard to undo. That's
very true. It's so interesting. We largely are what we do and how we behave. We don't really think of it that way, but there are a lot of behaviors that we learn. Unlearning them can be unbelievably tough. And if it's a coping mechanism that keeps us safe, then it's very difficult to shed it when we no longer need it. And I see that a lot with people who've been in unhealthy relationships. They leave, their heart is closed because they're afraid of being hurt again. But then they turn away great people who just, can't get through or lose patience, or they recreate the situation which justifies the protection they have, the wall they have. It's difficult to deal with, especially when we're not aware of it. And like you say, and then when we get away from the other person, rebuilding ourselves is terribly confusing, because we go, I'm not the person I was until recently, but I don't know who I am. The other person got demolished and destroyed, and I took part in that destruction.
Yeah.
So how did you cope with this? How did you so close that door, move on, reconstruct? What worked for you?
Yeah. So firstly, acknowledging that is what my story actually was. So that took quite a while for me to get to that point. But once I could, then you feel like you can deal with it, right? So for me, it was, okay, this did actually happen. That is the situation you're in, you were in, and this is where you are now. That's your reality. That's your story. Where to from here? So for me, I knew that I no longer had confidence in myself. And I was saying this recently, I really did not like the cliche, I don't know who I am anymore, I need to go and find myself. Because I was never like that, hearing that for me never made any sense. It was like, how do you lose yourself? That doesn't make any sense to me, until I was in it. And I went, oh my God, I actually really don't know who I am anymore. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was about tapping back into that and going, well, what is important to me? What do I like to do for myself? Not for anybody else, just for myself. Yep. What is it that I want? What does my future now look like? Because for me, as I said, we were together 17 years. I never saw a future any different without my husband. So to be out of that, I had to start again, and I had to start thinking differently.
Yep.
And I guess this is where, for me, the passion for coaching people with that similar experience comes in, because, geez, it would have helped if someone was helping me through that thinking process and challenging me and helping me separate the truth from the lies.
Yes.
So is this the truth for you, or is it their truth? Is that what you've been told?
That's true. That's a massive point. Is, first of all, I mean, for me, one of the turning points was deciding that no matter what, I want the truth from now on. At least I can build something with the truth. I don't care how ugly, how difficult, how boring, how tasteless. At least it's real. And anything else leads to hell, like literally leads to hell. And it's, you can think going outside is not particularly exciting. There's not very much going on. It's, average temperature. It's like, okay, spend a while being in an overheated oven, and then see how you feel about it. Boring is good. Like,
I'll take boring.
Yeah, exactly. At least it's real. Boring is an upgrade compared to absolute hell.
Yes.
That's one thing. Just get the facts right. And then what's so interesting is when we go back through the conversations to realize there are many things we believe to be true that simply are things that this person told us. And then sometimes we realize they said it, someone else confirmed it, but they heard it from them. So I've had that with one person, this Maldivian con man, who claimed to be many things, but everyone would back up his claims based on what they heard from someone else who'd heard it from someone else. So everyone confirmed his version, but they'd never actually witnessed anything firsthand. They just heard it from someone else. So I had someone saying, well, you told me that. It's like, well, I said that because, Joe said that. But Joe said that because the first person said that. So he created this feedback loop where everyone around him was confirming what he heard. And I think it's quite common and then realizing nobody actually witnessed what happened. There's no proof, so we could have made it up.
For sure. What a story.
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so you started again with, what is true about you, about what you like.
Yes.
And how was it with the moment where you started to basically focus on yourself, of take care of yourself? Because I remember this being tough, and I see other people struggle
Yeah.
with it. Shifting the focus from I need to please someone else to it's okay to start with me and start small, but do something for me. How was that for you?
Yeah, agree. Very tough. So, and I think your key word there is start small. So for me, I did have to find a full-time job as soon as our relationship ended.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been working ad hoc over the years, coaching and consulting, but hadn't been working full-time. So for me, it was, this is something I need to do because of the situation that I'm in. But when I thought about it, it's actually something I really wanted to do as well. So then it became, okay, well, let's just make this about me. What do I want to do? Do I want to go back to corporate? What sort of work do I want to do? Take everything else out of it except for my own desires. And I ended up working at the time for a not-for-profit in disability services, and it was probably the most rewarding job I've ever had in my life.
Amazing.
Which was just perfect for my time then.
Yep.
And I was also surrounded by very supportive people. So I didn't want to share my story. I was starting a new job and I was in the middle of the separation.
Wow.
So it was messy. And to be honest, quite traumatic. But once I felt like I was in the right place. So I started from there going, oh, there's other things that I want too. So once I think one thing opens up and you go, well, guess where I am? I'm doing what I said I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I have this in me. I can keep going just one bit at a time. So sometimes it's just taking that first step and backing yourself and having people back you. I did have that once, I opened up a little bit and would say, I don't think I can do this. I think I've been out of the workforce too long. And many people going, firstly, you're not that old, Kylie, like relax, be kind to yourself. And one step at a time, not leaps and bounds, just one step at a time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are a few, let's say, of the micro easy wins, let's say 5 of them that would come to mind? You say, easy things to tick off, easy things to work with.
Yeah.
Like blanket recommendations.
Yeah. So for me, the things that I kind of reflect back on that has helped me to get where I am are managing those events, the trigger events, right? So once I could identify what those trigger events were and put things in place to manage them, that was probably the most significant thing I did to not just keep me moving forward, but changing my mindset about who I am, what I want, and what I can actually deal with. Boundaries. So in the relationship, no boundaries. I had no boundaries.
Yep.
So as I said, co-parenting, still need to be in contact with the ex, never having had any boundaries before, set them up. Again, it depends on the individual, depends on where you're at with your own recovery, with your own journey. But a boundary that you set at the start will grow to be a bigger boundary later down the track. So even though it might be something really, really small, that's where you are at the time. That's good for you then. And then you just keep reevaluating. Oh, look, I did that. I survived. I thought I might have gotten in trouble, and I did, but I'm okay. What else can I do to put in place?
Yes, that's really important. I did it. I survived. It was okay. There was conflict. I'm still alive.
Yeah.
One of the keys that I remember, I had a conversation with a colleague in Kazakhstan about this. It's just the mindset of saying, I can do something and you can dislike it. That's okay. You have the right to dislike it. That's right. That's your freedom. And I don't have to care. That's my freedom. And if we want to work on it, if we both want to work on it, that's fine. But I'm not responsible for someone else's anger. I'm not responsible for their frustration. That's their choice. I can respect it. I don't have to react. I remember some other person I was saying, if someone gets really angry because you wear an orange t-shirt and they say, I told you not to do it, it's their choice. It's their choice. If they're getting upset because of an orange t-shirt that you're wearing, then possibly they've got bigger problems,
Yeah, I would think so.
Exactly. And if someone gets upset because you had coffee with a colleague, then okay. I think that's one of the key words are sort of, okay, you are upset because of this. Okay. You have the right. I let you process it. It's not my responsibility to do anything to dampen your anger. And maybe you're reasonable, maybe you're unreasonable. If you're reasonable and I'm unreasonable, then we shouldn't be together. If I'm reasonable and you're unreasonable, then we shouldn't be together. So, that's pretty much what's going on. If there's sometimes take this example, or if there's a flirtatious past and there's a risk that somebody might be cheating, you want to find out about that. And then you can decide if it works for you or not. If it doesn't, it's fine. But often we're in denial because we're afraid of it because of something else. Okay. Or there's nothing going on, in which case we're overreacting. Okay. So, but the issue is, what is the reality, the fact, or what is the overreaction? And quite often it's thinking, maybe I can protect this person against all other people because that way the person won't cheat. Maybe, but it doesn't seem very plausible. Yeah.
No.
It's not going to work out.
I don't think so.
No, exactly. Well, yeah, we're talking about starting small. Stuff I found is get the really basic things right, and that is drink enough water, cut out substances as much as possible, cut down sugar, exercise a bit, like more. Often people haven't done anything, so start by walking, then run, go and run 1 kilometer and then 2 and then build it up. Get all the basics we know we need, get them right. Buy a good eye mask for sleeping, get earplugs, make sure you sleep well. So get food, sleep, exercise, cut down on anything that makes us less happy, anything that produces dopamine in the brain, just cut down on that. And that usually makes a big change just in terms of mood. And then it's easy to establish boundaries when we've slept enough, when we're rested, when we're not.
Absolutely.
And all of that. It puts in and when if you just go for a 2 or 3 kilometer run, which isn't massive, but it's not small either, it's easy to establish boundaries because you've been moving in the world, basically.
Yeah. And it's a really good point. And you find things that bring you joy.
Yes. Yeah.
Sometimes it's as simple as that, whether it's something that you do or the way that you think. Mm-hmm. You can flip your thoughts. So if you're in a situation, and I am a huge overthinker, but I have, again, used my own toolkit to start going, I can stop myself, I can reevaluate, and I can flip those thoughts to create a better feeling thought, which then helps you get through your day, that helps you make better decisions, that helps you feel better. And sometimes it's just as simple as that.
What I found also helps a lot is observing emotions like a dashboard. If you're not familiar, you can look up the website atlasofemotions.org, which was done by Paul Ekman at the request of the Dalai Lama. And he talks about the function of each emotion. So I find for overthinkers, when they understand, right now I'm feeling anxious. Anxiety is a form of fear. Fear is linked to the unknown. Anxiety is linked to, let me get this right, it's something like there is a threat, or there might be a threat, and I'm not sure if I can deal with it. Okay, so now I can decode this as being, what do I perceive as being a threat? And if this actually does come to materialize, how can I deal with it? So all of a sudden it becomes a puzzle to solve. And overthinkers tend to like that. I can put things together. Now I've decoded it, and then usually the anxiety drops because if it happens, I'm ready. Okay,
that's right.
I don't have to worry about it. So then it's often going back into the action. I'm being cognizant of time. I'm wondering, do you? Because I think I have to let you go pretty soon. Do you have any tips that you would share for people who have to co-parent? I know it's a common topic, Like
Yeah.
what any do's and don'ts? Anything comes to mind?
Yeah. And this has really shifted for me over the past few years. So my children are, obviously getting older. So it does depend on the age of your children. So obviously, the younger they are, the more involved you both need to be. There's more contact between the parents and organising things and sharing information. But what I've been able to do over the past couple of years, which has been a big benefit to me because now my children are a bit older, is I don't have to be the person that organizes everything, that's constantly in contact and keeping up to date. And I can remove myself because, to be honest, I don't need that relationship anymore. And I don't want the relationship anymore. So my children are well aware that they can take that responsibility without it being, and I was very honest with my kids in saying, if I ask you to do something that you are uncomfortable with, you need to let me know. And they're really good like that.
Wow.
But I'm also I'm also very aware of not asking them to do something that might make them uncomfortable. It's more, okay, we're running a bit late. You text your dad and let him know that we'll be there in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Those little things that I was taking control of, I don't need to do that anymore.
That's excellent. That reminds me of the notion that Alfred Adler uses of tasks. Whose task is it to do what? And
Yes.
the task of the adult is to delegate as many tasks as possible to the children when they're ready, but explain that, this thing we need to do, whose task is it? If you're ready to embrace it, embrace it. And the more you do that, the more helpful you are. And kids love to be helpful. They don't like getting told to do what to do. But if you say, someone needs to do this, are you ready to do it? It can be much more constructive. And by the way, with the uncomfortable doing things, what tends to work nicely is to say something like, if I asked you to do this between 0 and 10, how comfortable would you be? So they can actually put it on a scale. And if they say, 2, so more on the uncomfortable side, what would it take for you to be more comfortable? Or how comfortable would you want to be for you to be able to do it? And it could be that it's just too much right now. Fine. But if they come up with something saying, if we do X, Y, Z, then I think I can do it, then we can say, okay, how about we try and check? And if you're not comfortable, would it be okay to tell me? So there's always the communication. And then it becomes just that's like a proper management tool of just having conversation, empowering, listening. But I find the if is very powerful because you're not giving the task. But if I did give it, how would you feel? And there's no threat of, if you say you don't want it, then I'll be angry. It's like, no, we're curious. We're seeing how we can manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. How would you feel about this? Are you comfortable with this? As you said, how comfortable? That scale is really good. I haven't actually thought about the scale. It's something that I ask my clients, but it's something that I've never used for myself. So
we got these blind spots.
Good reminder.
But it's helpful because if we do are you comfortable? It's a yes, no question. So if they say no, then it's in principle the end of the conversation. We could also do are you uncomfortable doing it? So it's a no-oriented question because that feels safer.
Yes.
No, I'm not uncomfortable. Okay. Or we use the scale. So I'd always go for the no-oriented question because it opens up the conversation. If they say, no, I'm not uncomfortable, it's like, okay, well, how will you manage to do it? You say you're not uncomfortable, so how will you do it? So they put together a plan just through the how question. Yeah. They can be quite quite helpful with them. How do you, just one last question, if I have a few more minutes of your time.
Yeah.
How do you deal with a toxic ex-partner who's being unreasonable or looking for conflict?
Yeah, been stuck in that a few times before, but now I actually don't get myself into those situations anymore. So I taught myself a few years ago to create space. So create space if you're on the phone and you're feeling like it's coming towards you, stop and create some space.
How do you
Thanks
do
for
that?
that. Yeah, thanks for that. I hear you. I'm going to call you back in a minute, or I'm going to
Oh,
call you
okay.
back later, like literal space, so
Mhm.
that you have time to think, to process, and to respond without, and I think I mentioned before, I used to get quite defensive because I felt like I was being attacked. So I had to, for myself, might not work for everybody, stop and tell myself, don't get defensive, don't react, don't buy in. And that's when I learned to say, okay, I hear you, thank you. I'm just going to call you back when I'm ready. I'm just going to call you back tomorrow. And sometimes the phone might ring again, but you don't have to answer the phone.
Yes.
And they're the little things, yeah, tough. It took me a while, and I would look at the phone and go, oh my God, I think I'm going to get in trouble again. Then I'm going to make it worse, and it's going to come back to me more.
Mhm.
But then again, you talk yourself through it. It's okay. I'm in a safe space. I'm in my own home. There is no threat of someone coming through the door
Mhm.
unwelcome. So I really did just need to set myself up in a safe space and set those boundaries and give myself time and space to not buy into anything.
That makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
yeah, realize it's okay to have space. It's perfectly reasonable to say, I can't talk right now. I'll call you back
Yeah.
later. And if
Yeah.
someone doesn't agree with that, then they're disrespecting boundaries, and that's a problem. Regardless of
Yeah.
what they're saying or thinking, that is the problem. I'm telling you, I can't talk now, and you want me to talk now. So that's a problem. We don't need to go any further than that.
That's it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And do you have a few more minutes?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
curious
No
also,
problem.
I didn't ask you about this, which is, so how did the relationship end? You told me that you didn't know much or anything about toxic people. You hadn't connected the dots. So how did it end?
Yeah. So we had gone through a couple of years of drama, trying to work things out. And okay, I haven't actually shared this part of the story to many people, but I'm going to share it. So I used to get woken up in the middle of the night to have important conversations, which was never good. Absolutely. And this happened over a number of years. And I was getting to a point. So the psychologist, a couple of psychologists had said, you can't keep doing this. You can't wake someone up to have an important conversation just because you think it's the right time. It's not the right time, and it's unhealthy. So it didn't stop anything though. So I then started saying, I can't do this. I can't respond. We'll end up in a fight because I'm not thinking and I'm going to react. I can't do this. But if you want to hear what I have to say, I'm telling you now, and I'm not going to tell you tomorrow. So if you care, you will listen now. Then it hit a point, first time ever, I said, I'm not doing this now. And the response back was, if you don't do this now, we're done. I'm leaving. And I
Awesome.
went, good night.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So pushing the boundary, like if you don't let me disrespect your boundaries, then it's
Yeah.
over. And then it was over.
It
Wow.
was over.
What
Yeah.
if, and how did you, they could either be liberating or terrifying or both.
Yeah, it was terrifying. It was terrifying.
What was the terrifying part of it?
Well, I remember I obviously did not sleep that night, but I remember kind of going, is he for real? Like, is this actually what's happening now because of this? Because surely that doesn't make any sense, because someone would not do that. And I thought, oh well, we'll deal with it tomorrow. And got up the next day and everything seemed quite normal. And I thought, okay, maybe he's not leaving then. So we were in the backyard and I said, so just about last night, where are we at with that? Oh, I'm still leaving. I'm like, okay, well then why are we doing this? What is this? Because I don't want to be doing this if this is over.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So your logic kicked in to show it's okay, excellent. He talked himself into shooting himself in the foot. That's fantastic. And then he couldn't back down because you said, well, you said this, you refused to back down, but therefore you have to change your actions. And otherwise, like I've known people like that who claim it's over, but they still stick around for 8 months until the other person kicks them out because they've got no intention of leaving because they got no plan. But they keep saying that there's a problem with this drama. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That thing about the sleep is what, terrible. And also I think this is where using the logic is so important. Some things are just, bat crap crazy. And we just have to recognize it and call it out as such. I remember one person, I got a few stories like that. One person, I was on holiday, calls me up when I'm with friends and we're about to go surfing, and not in Australia, but in the south of France, and decides that it's the right time to spend 20, 30 minutes on the phone with me to say nothing. And as I'm going to hang up because we're going to go, she says, well, actually, we need to talk. Like, we saw each other 2 days ago. We just spent 20, 30 minutes. You've said nothing. Now's not the right time to start a conversation. Like, I had 30 minutes. This is, we're not going to talk now because my friends are waiting. It's really embarrassing that you call me when I'm here after 2 days and I'm taking 20 to 30 minutes and there's nothing urgent. And that you don't say anything. It's, we don't know each other that well. There's nothing urgent. It's not the right time. And that was, well, a basic boundary that I think actually that was the last time we spoke. Yeah. That's
there you go. Wow.
Yeah, it was perfect. It's like, yeah. So she got upset. So in that case, call me back when at the end of your holiday. Mm. Okay. And so I decided I'm still on holiday. So there we go.
Yeah.
And then there was, let me see, other situations like that where, I forget what the other one was, but the same type of thing where there's, if this happens, it's they act in a crazy way. And if you stop and pause and reframe, and it could be the thing of going, so you're telling me that of the 24 hours of the day, the optimal time to have this kind of conversation is at 3 a.m. when I'm tired and sleepy and I can't think correctly. There's no other time that's even an option. Or what is the alternative? Because the goal is to get the person they can't think, disrupt the sleep, make them tired, and because it's easier to attack someone when they're sleepy. But if you say this, like, if this is how you manage time, we're not on the same page. It's not going to work out. The same one who called me was trying to start having a huge conversation late at night before needing to get up the next day. And I just said, we'll talk about it another time. That's it. I'm going to sleep. And she kept talking. So I had an eye mask on, earplugs in, kept talking, and I started just going, shh. And she, I can't believe you're shushing me. It's like, I told you, it's not the right time to have a conversation. We can talk any time you want, but not at 1 a.m. when I'm getting up at 7 and I need 8 hours sleep. And you haven't spoken all evening. Any other time, just not now. And we'll have it. Yep. It's fine. But the fact that you keep, like, you can disagree with my boundary, but you're just talking as though it doesn't exist. What's that about? Of course, it's the power dynamic.
Yes.
Yeah. So exactly, you establish a boundary. They dislike you disrespecting the power dynamic, and therefore they go for it. Okay. This has been really, really insightful. Thank you.
Thank you. It's quite a conversation.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, but there's no, it's really, really interesting, and to see how you've got yourself out of that. So interesting how the clinging to logic and just rationality. I think that's one of the keys to get us out of it is they try to make us go overboard with the emotionality, with the empathy, but we need balance. And I find that usually we need logic to get ourselves out of this. Otherwise, we stay stuck. So more empathy. No, it's not what we need right now. We need some good, hard logic, which makes sense of, you say this, you're not acting upon this. It doesn't make sense. You don't make sense. You're not, it basically shows you're not sincere. You're not authentic. You're playing games. You're not reliable. You say one thing, do something else. I don't know what to make of it. That's not how you build a relationship. And yeah, I think that's usually the path out that saves us. If people want to contact you, where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So my website is kylieborg.com. So you can just have a look on there. And you can, there's a free discovery call that you can book on there if you like, if you want to have a chat. And that's about it, really. I'm not big on, I have to admit, I do have a Facebook page, but it's really there just for people to link to.
Yeah.
I'm not big social media person, and especially because this is quite a personal topic for people. I've kept it quite sheltered, I guess. So, yeah.
Yes, I understand.
It's
a personal topic. It's hard to find there's a fine line between doing too little and doing too much, and then everyone's their own comfort zone. I think everyone's got their own style. I know some people are very happy to pump out loads of content. I don't know. I value a lot the authenticity and the thoughtfulness, and I find that keeping up with too much of a schedule makes it difficult to do that. We don't want to repeat ourselves, so then it's more, I guess, homegrown, as it were.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm much more a conversationalist than I am putting together collateral.
Yes. It's a different skill set. That's true.
Different skill set. Yeah.
Any last thoughts you'd like to share with listeners and viewers before we hang up this call?
Yeah, look, I guess, I'm on the other side of it. So my message is really do the work and you will get there. So be kind to yourself, be true to yourself, have a good support network, start trusting your gut again. If that's gone, that's usually gone. But you'll get there. It can happen. I'm good. Are you good? I'm good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's so true. I think going through these situations gives us the opportunity to decide, I want truth.
Yes.
However ugly, and truth is a disinfectant. So once we embrace the fact that it's gonna sting a bit, if we go for it, let's just go for it. Disinfect everything there is to disinfect. Find other wounds. Disinfect everything, because any of them could become worse, and any of them are something toxic people will be using again in the future, and we'll encounter them in the future. The main thing is being more prepared, being more healed, and it's awful, and it does get better. I think that's one thing that got me to keep moving is it's anything but this again. Like, the pain was so acute.
Right. Yeah.
Any alternative is better than this. And then the beauty is, once we find our feet on the ground, we can then start building things. And, we don't know when we'll have a conversation with someone and the person says, you said the one thing that completely changed what I was thinking and got me out of there. And these things grow. I mean, the fact that I've got more than 10,000 subscribers on YouTube is insane. The audience is growing, and it's just, if I said this to myself, 5 years ago, that I'd be 5-6 years ago that I'd be here, it would be incomprehensible. So the experiences we've had, we can share with others the lessons, and it creates a ripple effect. So for me, be part of the ripple effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing talking to you today.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for reaching out. So to everyone who listened, thank you for joining us today. Do follow Kylie, look her up, and thanks for listening, and I will speak with you soon.